There is a difference between a prayer that asks and a prayer that fights. You have been praying the asking prayer. You have been asking God to see what is happening in your marriage. You have been asking Him to change your husband, to end this, to bring him back, to close the door that should never have opened. And that prayer is real. Padre Pio never dismissed it, never called it wrong. But he said there is another prayer entirely. A prayer that does not ask from a place of weakness. A prayer that stands on what God already gave you, on the authority He sealed inside your marriage on the day you spoke those vows, and uses that authority to fight, not against your husband, against what has hold of your husband. Because Padre Pio saw something in his confessional that most people do not want to believe, that when a husband leaves his wife for another woman, there is almost always something behind the choice that is not just flesh and weakness and temptation. There is a spiritual force that moved in the moment the first door was cracked open, a force that knew exactly what it was doing. And Padre Pio said that a wife who only prays, asking prayers against a spiritual force, is like a soldier who writes letters to the enemy instead of picking up her weapon. And then he said, and this is what I need you to hear before anything else. He said, the wife does not know what she is carrying. She does not know the authority that is already hers. She prays as if she is begging God to help a stranger. But this is her covenant, her husband, her home, and in the spiritual world, she has rights here that no demon can contest if she learns to use them. Today I'm going to show you the prayer of war that Padre Pio left for women in exactly your situation. A 9-night prayer, a novena of spiritual combat. And I need to warn you ahead of time, this prayer is not comfortable. It will ask things of you that the asking prayer never asked. But Padre Pio said that when a wife prays this prayer for 9 nights, something begins to move in the invisible world that nothing else can move. I'm going to show you what that prayer is, movement by movement, night by night. But first, I need to show you the 3 things that are keeping most women from ever reaching this prayer at all. Because the enemy does not want you to pray this way. And he has been very, very effective at convincing you that you are not qualified to fight. But before I go any further, before I show you what stands between you and this prayer, I want to ask you something. If you're watching this video right now, you are carrying something heavy, something that wakes you up at 3 in the morning, something that follows you through the ordinary moments of your day, while you're washing dishes, while you're driving, while you're trying to hold the rest of your life together, and reminds you that your marriage is not what it should be. And you are not alone. There are women watching this right now who found out last week. Women who have known for a year and are still fighting. Women who are fighting for a marriage their husband has all but abandoned, and who keep fighting because somewhere inside them, underneath the exhaustion, underneath the doubt, there's a voice that says, do not give up. That voice is not delusion. Padre Pio would say that voice is grace. And I want you to write in the comments right now, I am ready to pray the war prayer. Just that. Write it as your declaration, your intention, your statement to heaven that you are here and you are not done. And if you have someone in your life who is fighting for a marriage, a woman you love who has been crying in private for months, write her name in the comments. Write it so that we can stand in prayer with her. Because Padre Pio said that the prayers of a community of believers on behalf of a single soul create a spiritual force that individual prayer alone cannot generate. Write her name right now. And then stay close, because what I am about to show you changes the way you pray forever. Let me tell you what Padre Pio understood about spiritual warfare that most Catholics never learn. He understood it not from books, though he knew his theology deeply, but from experience. 50 years of direct combat with demonic forces. The attacks on his body were documented. The voices, the physical wounds, the presences that manifested in his cell at night. All of it documented by the friars who lived with him, by the doctors who examined him, by the witnesses who saw the aftermath of those battles. And because he lived in this reality every single day, he had no patience for the idea that the spiritual dimension of a marriage crisis is invisible or irrelevant. He said to a woman who came to him once, "You think your husband just decided to do this? You think this was his choice alone?" The woman said, "Yes, of course. He chose it." And Padre Pio said, "A choice is never made alone. Behind every choice that destroys a family, there is an enemy who worked for years to get that man to that moment. Not to excuse the choice. The choice is his, and he must answer for it. But you cannot fight what you do not see. And you have been fighting the man when you should have been fighting what moved in the man. This is the foundation of the prayer of war. You are not fighting your husband. You're fighting what has attached itself to your husband, to the other woman, to your marriage. And that attachment is spiritual. It must be addressed spiritually with the spiritual authority that is already yours. So what is standing between you and this prayer? There are three things. And the first one is the one you will most want to argue with because it feels like the most natural response to what you are living through. The first thing standing between you and the war prayer is this. You have been directing your anger at your husband instead of at the enemy. Now hear me out before you react, because I am not saying your anger at your husband is wrong. He made choices. He is responsible for those choices. He owes you accountability and repentance and the long, difficult work of rebuilding what he broke. All of that is true. But Padre Pio said something to a woman in his confessional that went straight to the heart of this. She came to him furious, not sad, not broken, but furious. And she said, "Father, I want God to punish him. I want him to suffer what he has made me suffer. I pray every day that God would open his eyes by breaking him." And Padre Pio looked at her with those eyes that saw past the surface of things, and he said quietly, "Who are you angry at?" She said, "My husband." And he said, "Then you are angry at the wrong person. You are angry at the man who was deceived when you should be furious at the one who deceived him. The enemy used your husband, and the enemy is delighted that you are pouring all your spiritual energy into anger at the instrument he used rather than at him." The woman was completely disoriented. She had never thought of it this way. And Padre Pio continued, "Your husband is a soul in danger. He is walking toward the edge of a cliff that he cannot see. Your anger at him is like being angry at a sleepwalker. Wake him up. Don't scold him for the steps he took while his eyes were closed. This does not mean passivity. It does not mean no consequences, no confrontation, no holding of your husband to account. It means that in prayer, specifically in the war prayer, your target is not the man. Your target is what moved in the man. And until you redirect your spiritual energy toward the correct target, your prayer is landing on the wrong address. And do you know what the consequence of this error is? The consequence is exhaustion, because fighting a human being, even in prayer, is like fighting the ocean. You cannot move it. You cannot wear it down. You can pour every ounce of your spiritual energy into wanting your husband to change, demanding it, interceding for it, crying for it. And a man will continue to do what the deeper force in him is driving him to do, until that deeper force is confronted. Padre Pio said, "One prayer directed at the enemy is worth 1,000 prayers directed at the behavior." So the correction of this error is a shift in focus, not from your husband, but past your husband to what is operating behind him. And the war prayer makes that shift explicit. But we are not there yet, because the second thing standing between you and this prayer is even harder to receive. The second thing is this. You have been treating this situation as a problem to be solved rather than a battle to be won. This sounds like a small distinction, but Padre Pio said it is everything. A problem to be solved puts you in the position of the person who needs to figure out the right combination, the right words to say, the right changes to make, the right prayers to pray in the right order, to produce the right result. And when the result doesn't come, you conclude you haven't found the right combination yet. You pray harder. You try a different novena. You add another saint to the intercession. You look for what you might be missing. And Padre Pio said, this is how good Catholic women drive themselves to spiritual exhaustion. Not through lack of faith, but through a fundamentally wrong understanding of what they are doing. You are not solving a problem. You're fighting a battle. And in a battle, the question is not, have I found the right formula, but am I standing in my proper position with my proper weapons? Padre Pio said the wife who understands that her marriage is a battlefield, who understands that she has been placed in this fight by God with specific authority and specific weapons, prays completely differently from the wife who is trying to solve a problem. Because the woman in battle does not ask God to fix things. She asks God to fight with her. She does not petition. She advances. Do you feel the difference? Let me show you what I mean through a story that Padre Pio's spiritual daughter recorded in her memoirs. A woman came to San Giovanni Rotondo after 2 years of praying for her husband, who had left her for a woman he met at work. She had prayed every rosary she knew. She had made novena after novena. She had gone to Mass daily. She had confessed every sin she could think of, convinced that some fault in her was blocking the restoration of her marriage. She was completely spiritually depleted, and she told Padre Pio, "Father, I feel like I am pushing against a wall that never moves. I have done everything. I don't know what else to do." And Padre Pio sat with her for a long moment. And then he said something extraordinary. He said, "Tell me, when you pray for your marriage, do you stand up or do you kneel?" The woman was confused by the question. She said she kneeled, of course, as one does in prayer. And Padre Pio said, "Then that is your first change. Stand up, not because kneeling is wrong. It is holy and good. But for this prayer you stand, because what you're doing is not petitioning. You are advancing. A soldier does not advance on her knees. She stands. She faces the enemy, and she moves forward." That woman went home and began to pray, standing up with a different posture, not just physically but spiritually, facing the invisible battle rather than bowing beneath it. And she said later that something in the atmosphere of her prayer changed immediately. Not the external situation, that took time, but something in her changed. She stopped feeling like a victim of what was happening and started feeling like a participant in the fight. Padre Pio called this the shift from the posture of the widow to the posture of the warrior. And the war prayer is built on exactly this shift. And here, if you've been watching this far, staying with something that asks real things of you, I want to pause for a moment. Because the fact that you are still here means that your soul is not just looking for comfort. It is looking for truth. And truth that can actually change what you are living through. And that is exactly what Padre Pio came to the confessional to give. Not consolation prizes, not spiritual band-aids, but the real thing, the teaching that actually moves the invisible world. So I want to ask you to subscribe to this channel right now and hit the bell notification. Because what I am sharing today is one of many teachings Padre Pio left specifically for women in this situation. And every time I publish a new video, the bell will bring it directly to you. You will not have to search for it. It will find you. Subscribe now, hit the bell, and then let me show you the third thing standing between you and the war prayer. Because this one is the most serious of all, and it is the one the enemy works hardest to keep you from understanding. The third thing standing between you and the prayer of war is the most serious, and I need you to sit with it carefully before I say it, because it is the thing you least expect. After everything I just said about spiritual combat and spiritual authority and the wife as a warrior, the third thing standing between you and this prayer is the belief that you have to be spiritually perfect to fight. Let me explain what I mean, because this is subtle and it is devastating in its effect. You know that you have anger. You know that there are days when your prayer is barely coherent, when it is more of a scream than a supplication. You know that there are nights when you do not pray at all because you're simply too exhausted or too broken or too close to despair. And somewhere, quietly underneath everything, there's a voice that says, "You are not holy enough for this kind of prayer." Spiritual warfare is for saints. You're a woman who is barely holding together. What authority do you think you have? And Padre Pio said that this voice, this specific voice, is not your own conscience. It is the enemy's most effective weapon against the wife who is about to discover how much power she actually has. Because the enemy knows something you may not know. Your authority in this fight does not come from your spiritual perfection. It comes from your covenant. And the covenant was not made with conditions attached to it. God did not seal your marriage sacrament with a clause that says this covenant remains valid only if the wife maintains a consistent prayer life and never doubts and never falls into despair. The covenant is the covenant. It is sealed. It is yours. And the authority that flows from it is yours. On your worst day, in your weakest moment, even when the last thing you feel is powerful. Padre Pio told a woman something once that changed everything for her. She had come to confession broken by guilt. Not guilt over any great sin, but guilt over what she called the poverty of her prayer. "Father, I am ashamed of how I pray," she said. "My prayers are ugly. They are angry and desperate, and sometimes I'm not even sure I believe they're reaching God." And Padre Pio said, "Do you think God only listens to beautiful prayers? He listened to Job. He listened to David when David said, 'I am poured out like water, all my bones are out of joint.' He listened to the widow who came before the unjust judge and demanded justice until she wore him down. God is not offended by an ugly prayer from a suffering woman. He is moved by it. The prayer that costs something, that rises out of real suffering, real exhaustion, real love that refuses to die. That prayer pierces heaven faster than any polished recitation." And then he said this, "Your poverty is not a disqualification. It is your credential. You come before God as someone who has nothing left except the truth of what she is carrying and the fact that she refuses to stop. That is exactly what God works with. So the third error, the belief that you are not qualified to fight, is the lie the enemy uses to keep the most dangerous prayers from ever being prayed. Because a wife who knows her covenant authority, standing in all her broken imperfection, praying an ugly, desperate warfare prayer, is more spiritually dangerous to the enemy's plans than a polished prayer from someone who has no skin in the game. You have skin in this game. All of it. And the war prayer requires exactly that. Now I need you to do something important before I reveal the prayer itself. You just heard the most serious thing, the thing the enemy most wants to keep you from. The truth that your authority in this fight does not require your perfection. It requires only your covenant and your willingness to stand in it. And I want to ask you, do you know a woman who needs to hear this today? A woman who has stopped praying, not because she stopped believing, but because she started believing the lie that her prayer wasn't good enough. A woman who has been sitting on the sidelines of this fight because she decided she wasn't qualified for the battlefield. While the weight of what you just heard is still alive in you, take this video and send it to her. Right now, through WhatsApp, through a text, through whatever reaches her. You don't need to say much. You can simply say, "This is for you." Watch it. One share. One woman lifted off the sidelines and placed back in her proper position. Padre Pio spent 50 years doing that one soul at a time. Today, you can be his instrument for someone in your life. Do it now, and then stay close because the prayer itself is about to begin. And I promise you, after everything I just showed you, it will make complete sense. Here is the prayer of war that Padre Pio left for the wife who is fighting for her marriage. 9 nights, a novena of spiritual combat. And I need to explain the structure before I give you the prayer, because the structure is part of the theology, and Padre Pio's spiritual direction never separated the theology from the practice. 9 nights, because 9 in sacred tradition represents completeness in gestation. 9 is the number of months a child is carried before it is born into the world. And Padre Pio said the war prayer is the same. It is a prayer that carries something in the invisible world for 9 nights, until it is ready to be born into the natural world. You are not praying for 9 nights because God needs 9 nights to decide whether to help you. You are praying for 9 nights because you need 9 nights. 9 nights to move from the posture of the widow to the posture of the warrior, from the first movement to the 9th, from the woman who is only beginning to understand her authority to the woman who is standing fully in it by the final night. Each night adds something. Each night builds on the night before. And by the 9th night, you will have prayed every dimension of this battle. The personal, the covenantal, the intercessory, the warfare, the surrender, and the receiving. 9 movements, 9 nights. Let me walk you through each one. The first night is the night of seeing clearly. And this is where the prayer of war begins, not with battle, but with clarity, because you cannot fight what you cannot name. And most women enter this situation carrying a fog, the fog of shock, of grief, of disorientation, and they pray into the fog without ever stopping to ask God to show them clearly what they are actually facing. So on the first night, you go before God and you ask not for help, not for intervention, not for change. You ask for sight. You say something like this: Lord, I come before you tonight and I ask you for one thing. Show me clearly what I am facing. Not the surface of it, not the name of the woman, not the details that only deepen my pain, but the spiritual reality underneath. Show me what moved in my marriage before this happened. Show me the door that was opened and when it was opened. Show me the enemy's strategy against my husband and against my home. Lord, I do not want to spend 9 nights fighting what I cannot see. So tonight, before anything else, give me your eyes. Let me see my situation the way you see it. Not as a catastrophe that has defeated me, but as a battle that you have already placed me in the center of, with authority you already gave me. Let me see myself the way you see me, not as the victim of my husband's choices, but as the covenant spouse who is standing in this fight that no one can take from her. Give me your sight, Lord. Tonight, let me see clearly so that I can fight truly. And then you are silent for a few minutes. You do not rush away. You let the prayer do what prayers do in silence. You let God speak into the stillness if He chooses, and you let your own spirit receive. The first night is the night of seeing, and it is the foundation on which all 8 nights rest. The second night is the night of naming the enemy, and this is where the prayer begins to have teeth. Because there is something Padre Pio understood deeply about spiritual warfare that is confirmed throughout the entire tradition of the Church. Naming has power. Not superstitious power, not magic, but the power of precision. When you name the enemy specifically, you're no longer praying in general terms against whatever is causing this. You're calling out the specific spiritual forces by what they are. Padre Pio fought demons by name. He knew their strategies. He knew what each type of attack looked like. And he taught the souls in his care to be specific. So on the second night, you say, Lord, I name tonight what I believe is operating against my marriage. I name the spirit of lust, the force that took natural desire and twisted it, that fed my husband's eyes and imagination until what was wrong began to feel right. I name the spirit of deception, the voice that told him this could be hidden, that no one would be hurt, that love and betrayal could coexist without consequence. I name the spirit of disconnection, the force that worked quietly for years to create distance between us, to make small misunderstandings grow into walls, to make him feel unseen so that the attention of another woman felt like water in a desert. I name these forces not with my own authority, but with the authority of the one who defeated them at Calvary. I speak against them as the covenant wife of the man they are using, and I serve notice. You are operating on ground that does not belong to you. This marriage belongs to God. This man's soul belongs to God. And I am standing on this covenant ground and ordering you, in the name of Jesus Christ, to loose your hold. On the second night, you are not asking. You are declaring. And Padre Pio said the declaration of a wife who knows her covenant authority is one of the most spiritually potent acts in the Christian life, because she is not speaking from her own position. She is speaking from the position of the sacrament God sealed. And no demonic force has jurisdiction inside a covenant that God Himself established. The third night is the night of standing in the covenant. And on this night, you do something very specific. You go back to your wedding day in your prayer. Not sentimentally, not to grieve what it has become, but legally, spiritually. You return to the moment the covenant was sealed, and you invoke that sealing before God. You say, Lord, I stand tonight in the covenant you established on the day of our marriage. I recall before you the vows that were spoken, not only by me, but by my husband in your presence before your altar, witnessed by heaven. Those vows were not erased by what he has chosen since. The covenant was sealed by you, and what you seal, no human choice can fully undo without the participation of both spouses and the authority of your church. I stand tonight in that covenant as the wife you placed in it. I invoke the graces of this sacrament, all the graces you poured into our marriage on that day, the graces that are still available, that have not been withdrawn, that are still held in reserve waiting to be claimed. I claim them tonight. I call them into active operation in my husband's soul, in my marriage, in my home. Let the grace of this sacrament do what grace does. Penetrate what is closed, soften what is hardened, illuminate what is dark. My husband may have forgotten his vows. He may be living as though they do not exist, but you did not forget them. and I am invoking them tonight before you. On the third night, you are standing in the legal reality of what God established. And something happens, something Padre Pio described to women who came to him having prayed this way, something that can only be called a straightening. As if the spiritual posture of the wife, and by extension the spiritual posture of the marriage before God, becomes upright again. It is not visible yet in the natural world, but in the invisible world, something has been set right. The fourth night is the night of intercession for his soul. And this is the night of the war prayer that most closely overlaps with what we discussed in the second prayer video. But here it carries a different weight because it is embedded in 9 nights of combat and not only in a single prayer. On the fourth night, the wife stops fighting for a moment and begins interceding. She says, "Lord, I set aside tonight everything I want for my marriage, everything I want for myself, and I pray only for his soul. My husband is a man in spiritual danger. He has made choices that have moved him further from you. He may not know how far he has walked. He may have numbed his conscience. He may have convinced himself that what he is doing is acceptable or inevitable or even deserved. Lord, reach him, not for my sake tonight, for his. Reach him as the father who runs toward the son who is still far off. Reach him as the shepherd who leaves the 99 to find the one who is lost. My husband is that one. He is far from you, and I pray with everything in me that he would encounter you, not gently, if gentleness is not enough, but forcefully if that is what his soul requires. Whatever earthquake is needed in his interior, send it. I consent, Lord. I pray it, not because I want him to suffer, but because I want him to live. And a man who continues on this path without encountering you is dying slowly in a way he cannot see, and I will not stop praying until you reach him. On the fourth night, you become the intercessor rather than the combatant. And Padre Pio said that the switch between these two postures, between warfare and intercession, between declaring and surrendering, is what keeps the 9-night prayer from becoming spiritually rigid. You advance, you stand, you invoke, and then you open your hands and you give. And the giving is its own form of power. The fifth night, the midpoint of the 9, is the night of praying for the other woman. And I will not spend much time on the theology of this because we have already established it. But I will say, by the fifth night, if you have prayed the first 4 nights faithfully, you will find that this night is harder and easier than you expected at the same time. Harder because the previous 4 nights have made you more present to the full weight of what you are carrying. Easier because the previous 4 nights have also repositioned you. You're no longer only a wounded woman. You are a covenant warrior who has been advancing in the invisible world for 4 nights. And from that position, not from your wound, but from your authority, the prayer for the other woman becomes something you can say without lying. You say, "Lord, I bring before you tonight the woman who is with my husband. I pray for her soul. I pray that the grace of God would penetrate the deception she is living in, whatever story she tells herself to justify what she is participating in. I do not know her pain. I do not know what led her to this place. But you do, and you love her soul as much as you love mine, even though tonight I am the one whose home she has entered. Lord, I release her to you. I do not release her from accountability that is between her and you, but I release her from my hands. I choose not to hold her in the prison of my resentment, because Padre Pio taught me that resentment held in the soul is a chain that binds the person holding it more than the person it is directed at. I release her, Lord. Do with her soul what only you can do. And if her encounter with you causes her to choose differently, I receive that as your answer to my prayer. On the 5th night, you break the chain. Not dramatically, not perfectly, but you say the words and you mean them as much as you are able, and you give God the rest. The 6th night is the night of offering the suffering. And on this night, you gather everything, every night of broken sleep, every moment of humiliation, every time you smiled in public and were dying in private, every prayer that felt like it hit the ceiling and fell back, and you place it at the foot of the cross. You say, Lord, I take this suffering, not as something I am enduring in spite of you, but as something I am offering through you. I unite it to the cross of Jesus. I ask you to take this real, specific, grinding pain and make it into a spiritual currency that can be applied to the souls most involved in this situation. Apply it to my husband's conversion. Apply it to whatever is needed in the spiritual battle over my marriage. Let this suffering not be wasted. Let it count. Padre Pio carried the wounds of Christ in his body for 50 years, and he said those wounds, those daily sufferings, purchased graces for thousands of souls. I do not have the wounds of the stigmata, Lord, but I have this wound, and I offer it as he offered his, freely, in love, in hope, in the belief that you who transforms water into wine can transform pain into grace. This is the night you stop fighting against your suffering and start fighting with it. And it is one of the most powerful moments in the 9-night prayer because it is the moment you take the enemy's primary weapon, the pain he intended to use to destroy you, and you turn it against him. The 7th night is the night of binding and loosing. And this is the night of explicit spiritual warfare authority, because Padre Pio took seriously the words of Christ in the Gospel of Matthew. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. He understood these not as metaphors, but as real spiritual operations, real acts of authority that have real effects in the invisible world. And on the 7th night, you use this authority explicitly. You say, in the name of Jesus Christ, and by virtue of the covenant sacrament God established in my marriage, I bind tonight every spiritual force that is operating against my husband's freedom to choose God. I bind the spirit of lust. I bind the spirit of deception. I bind the spirit of disconnection. I bind the lies that are telling my husband this is love when it is bondage, that this is freedom when it is captivity, that this is happiness when it is destruction. I bind them, not in my own name, but in the name of the one who has all authority in heaven and on earth. And I loose the grace of conscience, that my husband would see clearly what he is doing. I loose the grace of memory, of the man he was, the promises he made, the life he built. I loose the grace of holy sorrow, the sorrow that leads not to destruction, but to conversion. I loose these graces over my husband tonight, as the covenant wife who is standing before God to pray these things over the man she is still married to before God. Padre Pio taught that this kind of prayer is not presumption. It is not spiritual overreach. It is a wife doing precisely what God equipped her to do, praying with the authority of her vocation from the ground of her sacrament for the soul of the man God entrusted to her covenant care. The 8th night is the night of trust, and it is the quietest night, because after 7 nights of fighting, seeing, naming, standing, interceding, releasing, offering, binding, and loosing, on the 8th night, you put down the weapons. You don't stop praying, but you stop working. You simply come before God and you say, Lord, I have done what I know to do. I have prayed what I know to pray. I have stood in what you gave me to stand in. And tonight, I trust you. Not because I can see what you are doing. I cannot. Not because the situation looks different. It may not yet. But because you are God and I am not. And because every prayer I have prayed for 8 nights has been a prayer you received. I trust that you are moving in the invisible world. I trust that the graces I have called upon are in operation. I trust that my husband's soul is not beyond your reach. I trust that this covenant is not invisible to you. I trust you, Lord, not the feeling of trust. I may not have the feeling, but the act of trust, the deliberate, willful, conscious choice to place this situation in your hands and leave it there tonight without picking it up again. This is the trust Padre Pio described as the highest act of the spiritual life. Not the trust that everything will go the way I want, but the trust that everything is in the hands of the one who knows what is best and loves everyone involved more than I am capable of loving them. I trust you. Tonight, that is my whole prayer. I trust you. And the 9th night, the final night, is the night of receiving. And this is the night most people have never prayed. Because receiving is a posture that does not come naturally when you have been fighting. You are used by now to giving your pain, your authority, your intercession, your offering. You have been emptying yourself for 8 nights. And on the 9th night, Padre Pio said, you open your hands and you let God fill them. You say, Lord, I come to you tonight with open hands. I do not know what you're going to place in them. I do not know the timeline of what you're working. But I receive tonight by faith in advance of seeing. I receive your answer to this 9-night prayer. I receive the movement that is already happening in the invisible world. I receive the graces that are already in operation in my husband's soul, even if I cannot see them yet. I receive your peace for today, even while the situation remains unresolved. I receive your strength for tomorrow, even though tomorrow is uncertain. I receive your assurance that this covenant is held in your hands and that you are not finished with it. And I receive, Lord, this is the most important receiving of all. I receive the truth of who I am. Not a victim, not a woman abandoned, not a wife whose prayers went unanswered. I am a covenant warrior who prayed 9 nights in the invisible world, who advanced when everything in her wanted to retreat, who offered when everything in her wanted to withhold, who trusted when nothing was visible. I receive that identity tonight, and I step out of this 9-night prayer as the woman who fought and who entrusted the outcome to the only one worthy of entrustment. That is the 9th night. And when you have prayed all 9, you will not be the same woman who began on the first night. Not because the situation will necessarily have resolved. Though many women who have prayed this way report movements in their husbands that begin within the 9-night window. But because you yourself will have moved. From the posture of the widow to the posture of the warrior. From the asking prayer to the war prayer. From a woman who felt she had no authority to the woman who knows exactly what she is carrying. Now I want you to stop for a moment and be honest with yourself. Not harsh, honest. Which of the 3 things I named at the beginning has been standing between you and this prayer? Has it been the first, that you have been directing your spiritual energy at your husband when your real target is the force operating behind him? Has it been the second, that you have been treating this as a problem to solve rather than a battle to be won? Has it been the third, the most serious of the 3, that you have been convinced by a lying voice that you are not qualified for this kind of prayer? Because if it is the third one, I want you to hear what Padre Pio said to a woman who told him she felt unworthy to ask God for such a bold intervention in her marriage. He said, Do you think the soldiers who fought for Italy in the Great War asked themselves if they were worthy to fight? They did not fight because they were worthy. They fought because their home was under attack, and they had been given weapons, and they knew how to use them. You have a home under attack. You have been given weapons. The rosary, the sacraments, the authority of your covenant, the intercession of the saints, and the power of a prayer that costs you something. And now you know how to use them. Worthy or not, fight. Worthy or not, fight. Let that be the thing you take from today. Not the perfect prayer, not the complete understanding, not the fully resolved heart. Just the willingness to stand up on the first night in all your imperfection and begin. Before I close, one more thing. I want to give you something practical to carry into the 9 nights that will help you stay anchored when the nights are hard. Because some of the 9 nights will be hard. There will be a night when you sit down to pray and you feel nothing. No faith, no power, no presence, just the empty weight of the situation. And Padre Pio's instruction for that night is this: pray the night anyway. Say the words even when they feel hollow. Stand in the posture of the warrior even when you feel like the widow. Because the prayer of war is not built on feeling. It is built on covenant reality. And covenant reality does not depend on your emotional state. The covenant is there whether you feel it or not. God is there whether you feel him or not. In the prayer you pray on the night, you feel nothing. The prayer you offer in pure faith without any emotional support. Padre Pio said that prayer is often the most powerful of all because it costs the most. And cost, in the economy of prayer, is what gives the prayer its weight. May Padre Pio, who fought in his cell every night for 50 years, who knew what spiritual combat actually costs, who came out of every battle bearing the marks of the fight, but never broken by it, intercede for you as you begin these 9 nights. May he stand beside you in prayer, as he promised he would do for every soul that asked for his help. May the graces of your covenant be fully released over your husband's soul. May the enemy who has been working against your marriage find, in these 9 nights, a woman who knows her authority and is not afraid to use it. And may you, at the end of the 9th night, stand in the peace that passes all understanding. The peace of a woman who has fought as far as she can fight and entrusted the rest to God. Amen. And before I close, I want to ask one last thing of you. If these 9 nights call to you, if something in you recognized your own situation in what I described tonight, if you felt something shift when I talked about the posture of the warrior, if you're ready to pray differently, write in the comments, I will pray the 9 nights. Write it as your declaration before this community, before heaven, and before the saint who left this prayer for you. And tell me, which of the 3 obstacles was yours? Which one has been standing between you in this kind of prayer? I read every comment, and when I see what you carry, I understand what to bring you next. If this video helped you, if it opened a door you didn't know was available, please leave a like. It costs you nothing, and it places this video in front of the next woman who is searching for exactly this answer tonight, alone, not knowing that a prayer of war was left specifically for her. Share this with her. You may be the instrument God uses to find her. And in the next video, I'm going to reveal something that Padre Pio said almost no one knows about the rosary when it is prayed for a husband who has strayed. He said there is a specific way to offer each decade, a specific intention for each mystery, that turns the rosary into a targeted spiritual weapon aimed directly at the enemy's hold on a straying husband. It is different from how almost every Catholic has been taught to pray the rosary. And once you learn it, you will never pray it the same way again. Stay close. Keep the bell on. I will see you in the next video.